chances favor the prepared mind. I thought this is something always important. People sometimes give too much weight to luck and chances, and success is um, is very much unrelated to these. Or if it is, it's in such a small proportion that you can't take it too seriously. But if you, the more you prepare, the that's when chances really become more fruitful, I think. Um, what we discussed last is the product concept, and it was important to see that there are many different components in the product concept. Something we didn't talk about yet is the brand. So brand are the uh, the name, the trademark associated with the product you're selling. And one component of the brand that is very important is called the brand equity. So the brand equity is this value that the brand has, and this value is expressed by four components. So the brand equity is the addition, the sum of those four components. First component is brand awareness. So people know or don't know the brand. Brand association are the expectation, the benefits perceived, the word association, the functions that the brand is associated with. Brand quality is like a spectrum from lower quality to higher quality. Every brand has a perception of quality by each individual. And then brand loyalty, which is the fact that there's a number of people that care for the brand, buy the brand regularly, recommend the brand. So the brand equity is all of this going from the left to the right, from less importance and weight in the brand equity, which is brand awareness, to the most important element of brand equity, which is inside the brand loyalty. So what's very important is to see that as a brand, what you're trying to do is to build the first layer to the second to the third and eventually to the loyalty, because the loyalty is the ultimate. One of the benefits, there's many benefits in loyalty, such as the fact that people keep buying, the fact that people recommend others, the fact that people buy the newer product. So you know that when you launch a new product, you have a certain a percentage of sales that happens from the get-go without even advertising. People will buy the newer version. But one of the most efficient um, performance and outcome of brand loyalty is the fact that the trade will give you a sort of credit. So what it means is that if you're a retailer, a store, or if you are an importer for a country, and this importer knows that your brand has a lot of customers that like your brand and repetitively buy the brand, they are more likely to carry your brand or give importance to your brand. So in today's world, to simplify and explain that, I would say that brand loyalty um, is like the number of influencers in the world that we live in. Sometimes there are jobs where having the most influencers is increasing the you being valuable, having more people that follow you. So a brand is the same. More people follow that brand, the more people that work with that brand are willing to work with the brand because it gives them reassurance. There are five strategies about branding. If you sell a brand with the same name to the same product category, this is called line extensions. So if you are selling a Danone yogurt and you're just adding flavors, for example, but you could call it Danone vanilla flavor yogurt and Danone strawberry flavor yogurt and Danone chocolate flavor yogurts and so forth, then that is a branding called line extensions. However, if you are selling this product in a new category. So you're selling, suddenly it's not a yogurt, but it's an ice cream, or you're doing something significantly different. Then in this situation, this will be called brand extensions. The issue with brand extensions is sometimes it's disconnected to what you're trying to make the product of. So in the case of a yogurt, you're making an ice cream, it's still a food, so it's still connected. But if there's no connection, usually the brand extension is weaker. So if you're making your yogurt and then after this you're making some vitamins, or you're making I don't know a computer, it'd be disassociated for Danone to be trying to make something that's so disassociated. And the issue with disassociating is it not only doesn't really help selling the product, but it damages the product that the brand is associated with. So there is a little bit of a danger of hurting your brand by extending too much, by being this brand that does it all. However, that's also sometimes a policy of the company to want to have only one brand and not multiple brands, in the sense that you want to for the brand altogether to grow. So there's one particular brand like that that comes to my mind is Philips. Philips will be selling audio systems. They will be selling electric shavers. They will be selling music boxes. They will be selling bulbs. So they will be selling all kinds of products that are sort of dissociated from one another, and they will want to grow the brand because that way they don't have to invest in new brands. However, this extension may be overextended sometimes, and it's hard to make the connections. Multiple brand is when you sell the same product category and you have different brands. Why would a company have sell a product that is essentially very similar but have multiple brands? Why would anyone do this? Why would a company decide to have multiple brands? Multiple brands in the same product categories?
I want to take a stab at it for a
Yes.
price differential and quality.
Yeah. So usually it's not so much from a product perspective, but from the consumer perspective. So you're stating it like from more from a
The product,
product perspective, yes. So you
right?
want to, from the
But they
consumer
want to
perspective,
target the customer price range.
yeah. So from a consumer perspective, the price will make a difference. That's correct. There will be people buying cheaper, cheapest, and there's people buying more expensive or the most expensive, and therefore you will want to have this different products. That's correct. Yes, Morgan.
So, I guess if you were to sort of translate this to actually like to the music industry, an example would be like a larger record company or something having tiny offshoot labels inside of it. And so you would want to like each of these brands has a slightly different audience base. So you wouldn't want to
Exactly.
just like throw artists of different genres or who don't make any sense together all on one record label. By
Yes,
having these smaller brands, you can more directly market to your target audience while still
that's right.
bringing the amount of money to them.
So you're right. So you and Ashley are right. The number one thing is the consumer. Since they are different consumers, you will be making different brands. So instead of saying we're going to focus on trying to get everyone, make one brand for everybody, that's very difficult. Make one brand for each of the consumers. That's more efficient because each brand will have its own positioning and its own benefit, which is related to the consumers, which is always the thing is what is marketing satisfying the customers and what is satisfying the customers is give the customers what they want. Since all the customers are not the same, you create different brands and different positioning so that way you can do that. You're right, using the music example. What's also very interesting is sometimes you also do that from a distribution perspective. So now I'm going to ask you to go and think about something as very cookie cutter, like a supermarket. Hopefully, you've been to a supermarket recently and you know what I'm talking about. If you go, let's say, to the dishwasher section, or it could be to the cookie section, or it could be to the soap section, or it could be to the pasta section. And so what you do, let's take pasta section, just for the heck of it, just to show you it could be anything. Um, so what you do is you make multiple brands of pasta and you put it in the pasta section. You do this so that way you can sell it to different customers because there will be a brand that will be higher, a brand that will be in the middle, and a brand that will be at your knee level. But the reason also why you do that is because that way you increase the number of products that you're selling to the distribution company. Distribution company care about the brands that sell the most. Number one, volume. Number two, the one that has the highest profit margin. And number three is the one that they have the largest number of references, it's called. So if you are, I don't know, I'm just going to use Morgan. If you're a Morgan company and you have so many brands that is carried by the supermarket, when Morgan tries to make a meeting with them, they're not meeting just with one brand from the Morgan company, but multiple brands. So it's kind of like one stone and several birds at the same time. So it's also a way to muscle the relationship with the retailer and the distributors by them having multiple brands. Another thing is it's also a way of flanking. So flanking is a strategy that consists of having a lot of product on the website, on the catalog, on the shelves, no matter on the app, shopping app, or whatever. It works on everything. Because if you have more products and you provide more of these products through different brands, you will be saturating more the market. And therefore, whenever someone buys a product, it's most likely to be a product of that company without them seeing it. So it's a little bit of dirty politics if you want, because that way you can muscle your way and you can sort of saturate the market. And everybody thinks they're buying that brand and that brand and that brand, but at the end, they're all buying the same thing. And in fact, the world is a little challenging right now from a business perspective because there's one company that is sort of the owner of everything. If you were to look at who is the biggest owner of American Airlines, do you think? It's BlackRock. Who's the biggest owner of Tesla? It's BlackRock. Who's the biggest owner of Warner Brothers? Is BlackRock. Who's the biggest owner of Disney? Is BlackRock. Who's the biggest owner of Citibank? Is BlackRock. Who's the biggest owner of Apple? Is BlackRock. Who's the biggest owner of Microsoft? Is BlackRock. Anyway, so at the end, we are in a economical situation that's kind of challenging because there's one company that really has sort of this control over all of these brands. And it's kind of, I think the best example that everybody knows is who owns Coca-Cola? BlackRock. What is the biggest competitor of Coca-Cola? Pepsi-Cola. Who owns Pepsi-Cola? BlackRock. So then at the end, it was not that way before. When you had two companies that were owned independently, you were doing business a very different way. But when the company is starting to be owned by the same, I mean, Universal. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of Universal. I'm kidding. Who owns Universal? BlackRock. So at the end, you may be wondering what is going on in the music industry, but could be that the music industry is sort of owned by a single company that makes distribution, marketing, branding very complicated because now suddenly there's a little bit of a control over all of this. So I'm not trying to tell you that we lived in a doom world and it's conspiracy theory or whatever. This you can just check. I mean, all you need is I don't know, access to the internet, which I guess you have, and just go to some financial um, system and just check for free. Most of them give you for free the main owners, and you can verify by yourself what I just said. But at the end of the day, it's either BlackRock, State Street, or Vanguard. In fact, what's interesting is the question is who owns BlackRock? And you find that it's mostly Vanguard that owns BlackRock. And if you try to see who owns Vanguard, then you can't find. There's no public information of who owns Vanguard. That's where the road dead end is Vanguard. Anyway, um, so looking at those strategies, we have multi-brands. That's the one that we discussed in just the past few minutes at length. Then you have new brands where you will have to have a totally new brand because what you're doing is extremely different from what you've done before. So you create that new brand for that new product category. And then co-branding is when you have a association of two brands together for the sake um, of gaining from each other. So you have like a Ford with a Cummins the diesel engine, or you have Intel inside your Dell computer or something like that. So this co-branding is what helps to build more perception of quality, more perception of brand awareness, more perception of brand association and brand loyalty. So it's all a question of what does it do for the brand equity. Now, I want to jump into the subject of when you are in business, you do have to think about your strategies. So there are more than four strategies, but there are four strategies that I would say work 75% of the time. If you were to remember anything after this class, I recommend you remember those four strategies. I would not be surprised that in the next 5 years, you will go back to those slides looking for the four strategies just to be able to use them in the presentation or whatever. They're very important. They are part of your baggage of uh, stu business music students to try to remember this. This is not frivolous. It's not superfluous. It's important you remember it. Anyway, I hope you will consider this. In these four strategies, there's market penetration, which is selling the same product in the same place. Market development, which is to sell to a specific group of people, same product, but to a specific group of people that you are not selling before or not focusing on before. Then diversification is a totally new product, totally new group of customers, has nothing to do with anything that you were selling before. The category is very different, and therefore this is called diversification. But the one I want to focus on is the yellow one, the product development. So what's product development? Is creating a new product, at least as perceived by the market. So the benefit of having a new product is you become innovative. So if you're innovative, you are able to select who you will be selling the product to. So you define and select the market target that you will be selling the product. It could be one target, it could be a combination of target. One target, it's called differentiated. A combination of target, it's called concentrated. That's going to be in the quiz next week. That's why I'm just saying it. Concentrated, differentiated is you need to remember the difference. One target, differentiated, combination, multiple target together, concentrate. Anyway, and so, if you also are the first one to innovate and come up with a product, you have the opportunity to work with the distribution and capture the channels of distribution before anyone else, because they will be selling your product since you are the innovation and you're going to have this entry in every store. So it's like if you have a product that already exists and you go and knock at every store, most likely they will tell you, no, I'm not interested. But if you have a product as innovation and is better than any other product that exists, you're more likely to get 20%, 50%, 100% of the stores are going to say, okay, I'll take your product. And then the next company that will create a similar product than you is going to have a hard time breaking in the distribution. So first mover advantage is very, very important. And it always shows you that the world that we live in, you have the producers and you have the distributors. And it's a world where there's a big fight, like a domination fight, is who is the most important, the brand that is producing or the brand that is selling. Well, we see there's a lot of brands that are selling, that are also producing their own products, so that way they can take away the power from the producing brands and say, hey, I'm safer way. I'm Vance. I have my own private label, the products that I make. I'm Trader Joe's. I don't need you. I sell Trader Joe's product and they are as good as the Nestle and the big Procter and Gamble product. I don't need Procter and Gamble. I can make my own product. But Procter and Gamble is n- normally a better producer because that's what Procter and Gamble is known for, producing. So therefore, they spend more money on advertising, spend more money in making the products, and therefore they are trying to build their brand up and show that you should be buying a producer brand more than a distributor brand. And that's the world domination, and this is why the distribution has become some of the most wealthiest people in the world. I mean, I just have to name um, Bezos from Amazon. How did he become so rich? Not by making product, but by distributing product. So distribution is one way to get rich very fast because that way you don't have to worry about the production. What is benchmarking? Benchmarking is analyzing your competitors' strengths and weaknesses. That's just a summary. Benchmarking is more than just looking at their strengths and weaknesses. With benchmarking, you can also look at your competitors' strategies, your competitors' targets, positioning, pricing, where do they sell, distribution and channels, but also are they making new products? How are they making new products? What's the method? What is the overall product line? What is the quality of their products? How do they communicate? What messages do they have? Which channel of communication do they use? Which suppliers, intermediaries? What kind of partners? How do they hire staff? And you can do all of this in Los Angeles, but you can also do it in California, and you can also look at this in New York, and you can also look at this in Mexico and China and everywhere else, and benchmark it across even different industries. That's why if you want to build innovation in the music industry, oftentimes you have to borrow from another industry. And if you work in another industry than the music industry, it is great to have this experience about the music industry because you'll bring something new to that industry coming from the music industry. So to be innovative, it's most likely that you will be someone disruptive if you think across industries and you across countries more than if you're someone that is looking right around you and you're trying to learn from your competitors. Very difficult to learn something disruptive from the competitors because obviously since they're doing it, it won't be disruptive. So you have to reach out much further away. So benchmarking is very important. Another thing is important is to look at the consumers when they buy. Not all consumers are equal, but even in terms of the when do they buy. Some people buy very early because they are very innovative. That's a personality trait. It's part of the way they look at the world is whatever is new is better. And you have some of the people that are at the very bottom of this. They're more risk averse. They're more skeptical. And therefore, they are not thinking of buying first. They want to buy last. And so within this, you have like a bell curve between the innovators, the early adopters, early majority, late majority, and finally laggards. What this tells you is there's a percentage inside this. So I will not ask a question that will require you to remember the exact percentage for each one of these. Um, I mean, that's a pure memory type of question. I will ask more question, who is after the who is before the late majority? So what is the consumer group before the late majority? What is the consumer group between the early adopters and the late majority? So it's sort of knowing those terms and knowing which one is first, second, third, fourth. Okay, so that's that and fifth. So it's just learning the order. The first thing. Now, what's important for you to learn um, more than a memory basis is the what. Why do we care for this? What's very interesting from this is to understand the concept of a movement. The concept of a movement requires a spark. The spark is the second most important thing because the most important thing in a movement is to create the buzz. And the buzz is not created by the innovators. The buzz is created by the early adopters. So when there's a movement, it's not the one person that starts this. What's important is the people that model, that copy the first group of consumers, because those people will be copied by a bigger group. So it's like a snowball effect, like a spillover effect, where you definitely want to start selling to innovators because they create the spark for early adopters. What makes a business successful is to sell to early adopters, not to innovators. Innovators are people that are very fanatic, people that are very specific, and very rarely a business makes money from selling to innovators. So it's a requirement to get those innovators because it's a spark to get to early adopters. You don't sell a product to early adopters. Before it gets to early adopters, it has to go through the innovators. So it's a requirement to find them. So when you do research, you do try to identify who are the early innovators and who are the early adopters in order to try to sort of infect the early adopters because you need those innovators to carry the flame to the early adopters to start the buzz. So, how would this be important for anything? It's important for any product, but I can't stress so much how it is important for the music industry because within the music industry there is a movement concept that has a huge influence in the consumption of music. Um, it's oftentimes orchestrated and sort of manipulated by the big major labels to create a movement. They create those movements. Obviously, now they create those movements through the social media by having social media buzzes and by having growth within the social media in order to build the sort of the algorithm in order to get the attention. This is true for the music. It's more true for the music than many other product and markets, but it's true pretty much everywhere. So in the case of Playita, when you're looking at this, you're thinking, how am I going to get Playita to get those early adopters? And that's what's very important that you think about those groups. Could this, at least the first three that is there, innovators, early adopters, and early majority, and this be a slide in every one of the presentation, I think it would be. We sort of want to hear about your belief what you need to do in order to go to the innovators, early adopters. But what's important is what is it that the early adopters want? What is it that the opportunity that you have identified that will be the trigger for generating this movement? You know, it, it could it be the product, but could it be the imagery? Could it be the some cross connection between something they do and a change of culture, a change of consumer, a new trend, something that you have to identify in order to support this this virus that will penetrate the market in order to start contaminating, infecting different consumers. So that's an important concept that is related to new product development. Another concept that is related to new product development is the concept of revenue and the concept of growth and the concept of profit margin and the concept of uh, birth and death as well, and maturity and decline. So the idea is if you're a business, you know that you have to create one product. Now, you would hope that every product that you create is successful. But sometimes the most successful product might be the one that you thought were least successful. I mean, that has happened so many times that you have to take this into account. So you have to be sort of humble, but you have to do your research and you predict and anticipate as best as you can, but you have never 100% certainty. So what you do is if you have some large resources, is you create multiple products that you send at the same time. That way, it's sort of the spaghetti on the wall type of strategy. The more spaghetti you throw on the wall, the more you'll have spaghetti that's going to stick. But if you only throw one, it's a lot of weight given to one spaghetti. So if you have a small business, you do, and you could think about a singer, a band should have launch one song or multiple songs and hope that one works. And so it just depends of the resources. But to make it simple, let's say you're a small company, so you do P1 at time one, and then you do P2 at time two. So you have to decide how close is time one and time two, depending on your resources. But the overall idea is you want to grow the revenue. And to grow the revenue is you're going to have to launch multiple products to carry the growth. And some will generate no gain, and some will generate as much gain as several products together. So it's this idea of continuous product development. Continuous product development helps the company generate growth. The also, which is behind this, is that even if you have a product that is successful, you need other products to come behind because you don't want to be a one success story. You don't want to be a singer with one song. And I know that happens. They're singers, and then it becomes nostalgia, and then they go to the local casino and they do a concert 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the road. And so you still have a career. But you want to understand that, you don't want to be the BlackBerry phone that everybody forgotten because you went through the four stages. So you have to constantly come up with products. So the four stages is market introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. But the reality is there's five stages because before the introduction, there's development. So you have development where you have zero sales, you're just generating the product, then you introduce it, then it grows, then you have maturity, and then decline. And when you have a product, let's say you do P1, you're in development, then you launch P1 in introduction. When is P2 made? Well, maybe P2 is made in development. When P1 is in the second stage, P2 is launched. And so that's the idea that you have like constant product in different stages. You don't want all your product in the same stage. It's that's sort of what we hear as an analogy with the demographic aging population, where you have more and more old people, old people, and young people that do not want to have kids. And then you just wonder what happens in 20 years when the population is divided by two. And that's something quite frightening when you actually look at it from a consumer marketing perspectives. For example, CSUN next year will be suffering from the fact that there's a 30% decline of birth rate in 2008. So in 2000 7 and 8, people, because of the economic crisis, 30% less birth rate at that time. Because we get 17, 18 years old people, those 17 and 18, there's going to be 30% less. So the university will have a drop of students of suddenly 30% for a few years because of the natality. And which is nice is that natality went up back in 2010. And obviously, obviously, it's not obvious, but it went up in 2020, 2021 again. So the natality is something that goes up and down, but it has a impact on demographic data and economic data and then on everyone who's in the business of selling a product because there's changes of population in different pockets. So this will have an impact on the economy, but it will have an impact also on the product. The length a product stays in the growth stage will be impacted by the number of people. So this relates to the concept of strategy. So therefore, should you have a strategy that evolves for your product, an objective that evolves for your product as your product goes through different stages? Of course you do. Because in the introduction stage, the strategy is very much to grow the awareness versus in the next stage is you try to maximize the market share and you grow the profit. So you were making $1,000 profit. Next stage, you want to make $10,000 profit. But then in a maturity stage, or maybe not 10,000, but hundreds of thousands of dollars profit. But in the maturity stage, the issue here will be that your profit will go down, but your volume will go up. So if in the introduction and growth stage, you are making 30% markup. In the maturity stage, that markup will go down. And you do this in order to keep your market share. The market share that you grew from the introduction and the growth will be smaller. So you have, let's say, 50%, just to give an easy number to follow, in the introduction and the growth. So half of the market is your product, but you don't have too many competitors. Now, when you're in the growth, suddenly you have 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 competitors because you have many more competitors. Usually that means there's pressure on the market share. You have to share the market, so you don't have 50% anymore, you have 30%. And you try to fight not to go to 10%, with so many competitors, you try to keep a large number because your prices will have to go down because everyone will fight for the price and therefore you'll be making less money. But because of the volume, the overall revenue will keep growing, but it's the money you make per unit will be going down. And then in the decline stage, really what's happening here is you start making the decision about, is it still worth trying to sell this product? Are we making enough money for how much the product is costing us? So you try to milk that brand by trying to make the most out of the sales and decrease your expenses. Eventually, all this is summarized by the 8 steps of the new product development strategy. So the new product development strategy starts with the ID generation. The ID generation is the one that you need to have the biggest curiosity. You need to have no prejudice, and you need to collect as much information as possible. The broader, the longer your list of IDs, the better. Then the ID screening is evaluating those IDs. Um, there may be some good ideas, but you can't implement them now. The timing is wrong. So you separate. Once you've identified the best ideas, you pick one or two and you start making some concept. So maybe it's a visual concept, maybe it's a description, like a definition of the product, or maybe it's a 3D printed concept, or maybe it's a demo type of music, and you have different sounds and so forth. And then you test this and you get some ideas and you select the best one from the concept development. And after testing, you start thinking about the strategy. What would be the strategy? So, who would be the customers? And what customer would be the best? What would be our prices? What would be our promotion? What would be the distribution network? What should the product be made of? And all the details. You start defining this in your strategy. Then you analyze the business because now you talk in terms of investment. How much am I going to invest? How long is it going to take to make the product? How much stock inventory should I buy? How many suppliers should I have? What would be the investments? Do we need investors? What would be the return on investments? So you do some break even analysis inside your business analysis section. Then you develop the product, then you test the product. So the test of the product, you either test it by pretending to sell it to a group of virtual customers. That's one of the tests. Another one is you test it by selling it in one store, in one state, in one city for one day. I'm just using 111, so you see it could be 222 or 122, but just in a small scale, you sell the product just to see what it goes. Maybe you sell it to the club. You have a fan base, and you will be selling the product to the people that have the loyalty. They are fanatic about your product, and they get to buy those limited edition and then see what people think of. There's a company who's been extremely successful. The gentleman that owns this company is the richest man in his country. It's called Zara. So Zara is a clothing company which was originally just for women, but it's women and men now, which is from Spain. One of their success was their test marketing. What they would do is they would make a limited edition number of products and they would put them in their store and they would try to see the how soon would they sell those limited edition products to then slightly design them differently, maybe to be more cost effective, and then sell it in all the Zara stores. Commercialization is when you start selling it in many places, if not everywhere. So that's why it's important to see that if you say we're going to do product development strategy, there are lots of steps. It's not the most complicated one because the most complicated one will be diversification since it's a new product for a new market and it's a very different category of product. But product development is a strategy that is, I would say, the most connected strategy to marketing, which marketing is about satisfying customers, and the criteria of satisfaction for the customers keeps changing, and therefore you have to keep creating new product in order to keep satisfying the customers. What I do now, therefore, is I will quickly jump into the next section that has to do with pricing. So pricing is, strangely enough, it's the only of the four P's that doesn't cost money. Product costs a lot of money because you have to make this product and make several of them and the development and so forth. You have to have an inventory. Oftentimes, you have to give it to a distributor before they even pay you. They have like a certain amount of days, months to pay you. And promotion, obviously, you have to advertise, and that's always cost money. And pricing is the only one that doesn't cost money, but that one has to do with money. So the idea behind this question of pricing is what should your price be? My price should be the lowest as possible because I'm not doing well and I'm not trying to make a profit. I'm only trying to reduce inventory, increase cash flow, and make it to the next month. So survival. Maybe your pricing policy here, an objective, is to maximize your profit. So you choose the price that will try to give you the biggest profit as possible. Maybe another one now is to increase the number of product being sold because you're trying to get to a higher market share. So that would be the concept of market share product pricing. Another one maybe related to the perception of your brand. If you keep your prices low, people perceive that your product will not be as good. I've run out in this situation many times where there would be distributors that would sell my cognac, for example, in stores in New York, in in Chicago or in Florida, and they would sell my product too cheap. And the reason they would do this is either to reduce inventory or just to be able to, on the internet, be picked out for selling my product, the cheapest one in America. Sometimes they can't ship the product anyway because there's laws and regulation across states, but they would do this in order to get more vision, more audience, more viewers that comes to their websites. So the price is an indication of quality. People sometimes often use the price as indicating more quality. If it's more expensive, it's got to be better. How do you calculate the price of your product? So it's pretty simple. It's the fixed cost plus the variable cost. So the fixed costs do not change based on the number of units that you produce. If you produce one unit, the fixed cost is the same as if you produced 500 units. So the best example is the rent. This building that you own has a fixed cost, and that you sell or you make or you do anything, it stays the same. The variable cost is therefore related to the number of products that you make. So the more products you make, the more you use materials, and therefore the cost of the um, running your business is increasing. But that's kind of a healthy thing because you're spending more money, but you're making more money. So you're selling, I don't know, you sell shirts. So you sell 100 shirts, so you need um, 50 yards. Now you sell 200 shirts, you need 100 yards. So it keeps going up. But as you're spending more money on the yard and on the buttons, on the threads and all the components you need, you're spending more and more money. But at the end, you're selling more and more shirts. So therefore, you are able to pay. And so you have to have this cash flow between the time that you sell the product and the time that you're making the product in order to pay for the production of the product. All of this generate the total costs. Now, the other cost consideration is economies of scales. Economies of scales related to the number of units that you sell. The more product you sell, the more you make economies of scales. So packaging is expensive, and usually when you buy from the factory, the manufacturer of packaging, they give you a cost per unit. There's like a minimum order quantities. And this minimum order quantities has a price that keeps going down the greater the quantity that you buy. So if you buy 1,000 boxes, it's going to be $1 a box, as an example. And if you buy 2,000, and that's oftentimes what people that have never done it don't realize, is if you buy 1,000 bucks, is $1. If you buy 2,000 bucks, it's 99 cents. So sometimes it's not even 99 cents, it's 99.999 cents. And then the price starts changing at 5,000, at 10,000. It's sometimes it's large volume for the even the price to really change. And that's all the issue of the supply because there is also contingencies because sometimes you have to pay insurance and you have to pay storing and you have to pay a duty and a fee and all that. So you you get surprises, when you start manufacturing things. So economies of scales is the idea that you will reduce the price of each of the individual components of your product by buying more of them. And then altogether, if you have 100 components and you save 1 cent per component by increasing the quantity, then you'd be saving $1. And usually with saving that dollar, you can reduce the price. So then you can reduce the price by $1, or you can reduce the price by 50 cents and then use the 50 cents to um, promote better the product so you sell more of the product in the future. The experience curve is different. The experience curve is the more you do something, the better you become at doing what you're doing. And by doing this, suddenly your production efficiency is increasing. So, it's like imagine someone that does a concert, I don't know, two a year, is not going to be as efficient in setting up the concert and moving and organizing as someone that does it twice a week and someone that does it 3 times a week. So with experience, you become better at doing the same thing. You become just more efficient. Going back to packaging, I see this in packaging. It's very, very common. It's like if you have a packaging line, which means that you have people that put products inside packaging, every time you have new people, your production is divided by two. Uh, People that after they've done it for a week, they become experts in the production. They can do it while they have a conversation. Versus when you have a lot of beginners, they really need to see what they do with their hands. It's like typing a letter. The more you type letters, the more you use your computer, the better you are at typing the letters faster. And so that becomes the experience curve. You just type faster and get things done faster. It's experience. Price elasticity is this idea is that you may change the price by making the price go up or the price go down. So if um, if the changes of price, um, if you change the price and the demand doesn't change, therefore demand is inelastic. You change the price, people don't buy more. You change the price, people don't buy less. That means demand is inelastic. But if there's a small change of price and people don't buy anymore, therefore means people have a price elastic demand. So you see with gas prices this past few days, the gas prices is going 10 cents, 20 cents, 50 cents, 60 cents, a dollar, and people are still buying the gas. So it's a inelastic. It's a big change of price. People still are buying as much. Maybe they won't buy exactly as much to a certain extent because there will be a point. I mean, if the gallon goes $8, $9, $10 a gallon, suddenly there may be a change in their perspective of buying or not buying the gas. So price elasticity is important because it's the sensitivity to the price change, and there are different situations. So what's interesting when you talk about luxury, it's if you reduce the price, people buy less. If you increase the price, people buy more. And that's one of the definition of luxuries is they are have elasticity of demand, but also from both sides, being more or less depending on the price going the opposite direction than a normal good. So the pricing methods are such that you have the cost-based pricing, which is the most accountant-like, which is that you say that my product cost me a dollar and I want to make 50%. So I'm going to sell it $1.50. And so the cost-based pricing is cost plus a percentage, 50%. Cost plus 10%. So if you say it's cost me a dollar and I will make 10%, means you sell it at $1.10. The problem with the cost-based pricing is it's not looking at what the market wants. Because by doing cost-based pricing, you may be making less money than you should. Or you could be selling a product that has a price that nobody wants. By you just looking at business from an accounting perspective, you're not taking advantage of what people are willing to pay. So if people are willing to pay $5 for this thing and you do a cost plus 50% and you sell it for $1.50, you may actually not be making as money as you should, and you may be reducing people's interest in the product because it appears too cheap. So cost-based pricing does not optimize business return on investment. Break-even analysis is the one that is the most financial uh, investor oriented. So cost-based is accountant, break-even is more investor oriented. Break-even analysis is the one that you will see in the Shark Tank programs when the shark would say, um, what is your return on investment? What's your cost on the product? How many product do you expect to sell? And then based on the number of products being sold, the amount of profit being expected, the price of the product being sold, the cost of the product, they can anticipate the amount of profit that will be generated. Therefore, they will be able to see at what number of product being sold, what would be the profit, and which number of products needs to be sold in order to reach the amount of profit which will allow the business to pay back the investors. So for investors, that's very important. That's why when you look at Shark Tank, every meeting of Shark Tank, every episodes, they talk about break-even analysis and maybe another one of these. But break-even is always discussed. Break-even cannot be my favorite because it's a financial bias um, pricing method because the most marketing biased pricing method is the value-based pricing. So I'm saying this why? Because the value base is what is it worth for the client? One client may be worth $5, another client may be worth $10. Who's my client? Is my client the $5 client or the $10 client? Your client is the $5 client. Okay, so that's what the product is worth, $5. So that's the more, I think, realistic because it's what the customers are willing to spend, but it's not totally complete because what if the customer says they're willing to spend $10, but your competitors, they're all between $5 and $6. The consumers are not stupid. They will be buying the price of the market price. They will know, for the most part, the consumer will know that it sells between 5 and 6, 6 being the most expensive. How could you be 10? There may be people that think because you're 10, you're better, higher quality, but you take a risk with this because people are not stupid. And thinking they are is unfortunately wrong for the most part. So, what would be my recommendation? My recommendation is to start from a value based, number one, to look at the competitors' pricing, and three, do a break-even analysis with different scenario based on a different number of units being sold. And as you do this, then you can start plotting the type of return on investments based on a larger, like the most optimistic view of units being sold and the most pessimistic view of units being sold. To tell you the truth, the break-even analysis is the most important formula that you should be aware in this class. I do not, there's so many things that I am hoping to see in this class on the 14th of March that I do not require you to do a break-even analysis. However, if one person in your group, or more than one, is a little bit familiar with the break-even analysis, I strongly recommend that you do a break-even analysis. Do I see break-even analysis at this stage of this class? Very rarely. I would say 1 out of 10. So it's like it takes me three cohorts to see one group to do a break-even analysis. So it's like 3 times 4, 12. So it's 1 out of 12. It's a very small number. So Professor, why don't you push it? Well, because we push it in the next class. So we're gonna get to it. I like to push everything. I have all my um, dreams and desires accomplished in one class, but the reality is I spread it into both. So we'll be focusing more on having you develop a break-even analysis. In fact, in the presentation you will do in May for the next class, everybody will have a break-even analysis. So at the end, you'll all have to cover it. I just wanted to bring it up here because I think if you want to start putting your head into it now, that's better. Where should we go? Just Google break-even analysis. It's not that complicated. Even look at Wikipedia, what's break-even analysis. Won't be a waste of your time. It's very important skills. It's used by every business. It's used by every investor, like 100%. It if you a successful business person in the next 5 years, I don't even have to ask you if you use the break-even analysis. It's certain that you used it. So it's not a marketing tool. It's a financial tool. It's not complicated, and it should be used by everybody. So I just wanted to say that. Um, the four pricing strategies are simple. There's the two basic one, which is skimming and penetration, and they are exactly opposite of the other one. So scheming is when you have a new product and you decide to have the highest price as possible because you can do that because your product is different, better, and innovative. And therefore, your consumers will want to buy this product because it's just so much better. It's like a software that does things better, or the um, the first iPhone, something really disruptive to the point that your product can be superior. It's using a technology that has AI, and you're the first one having AI in whatever support that you have. Your product is more expensive, but it's justified. The problem is by doing this, it's likely that you will sell less product, but you will be making more profit. So then you have to anticipate the less, how much is less product and how much product are you selling and how much um, price are you reducing it or sorry, increasing it that it justifies. So you could be selling less product but make more money because you have a higher profit. But you could be selling less product with a higher profit and then make less money because you could have reduced a little bit the price and sell 5 times more product. So there is a prisoner's dilemma in making a decision for skimming, but it has to be justified by your product to be superior. And therefore, you have no competitors. Because if you have competitors and if you see that your product will not be the best product, therefore you have the alternative of penetration. So penetration will be to have the lowest price as possible when you sell a new product. But one may say, why is your product the cheapest one? When in fact it's the most superior product, you're missing out in trying to sell it for more money. The answer is yes, you will be missing out, but you took this consciously, this decision consciously by trying to boost the volume of product that you're selling. By boosting the volume of product you're selling, a lot of people will be buying your product, and your product may become product category. Like iTunes, like Frigidaire, like Kleenex. Here, my nose is runny, I'm grabbing a Kleenex, you know. And so, therefore, penetration is also very important because you suddenly saturate your market with your uh, with your um, with your product. Oh, um, sorry, Ashley, I didn't see that you were going to ask me a question. Go ahead. But I muted you because I thought there was a background noise.
Yeah, I was flipping my papers for my notes. I
Okay.
want to back up a little bit and
Yes.
talk about the break even analysis when
Yes.
it applies to Playada. Um, they don't have a budget, and what they perform free a lot. So how would you begin to do where would you do that, on their performance revenue or on their merch? How would you do
On both. What happens is because you're doing like at least a 3-year plan, you I would not recommend that you plan for 3 years of making no revenue.
okay?
There's got to be a time where they need to start making some money. So what you want to do is spend the least as possible at the very few weeks, the very few months, but start getting some motion and growth in
Got you.
terms of growth and so forth. So they will be and then if we can go back to Matters, for example, the presentation that was done, I think it was the first presentation this semester. So that was very early in February. That band had no money. They had no social media. They had nothing, but they had a very good appearance, a look, an extremely good look. And that good look, and the music was also very good. And so the students decided that they could be creating music and video content that they would give for free to some vintage clothing company
Mm,
to put on their social media, but then they would not give it to the vintage clothing company that poor social media. They started to look at small business. They were really small, small budget, but they had lots of followers, and they could really make their video even more interesting by having something much more custom and tailored. So therefore, Matters would have had to work sort of a little bit more for free in collaboration with this company, but suddenly they would be seen by tens of thousands of
right.
people and so forth.
Okay, so that's where the numbers coming from. Okay,
So
I was wondering.
yes, but then let me keep on going. So then what they were supposed to do from this is then go for bigger things. And the students actually related that they should be working for like a brewery, a medium-sized brewery, not Anheuser-Busch, but a medium-sized brewery, more like a craft brewery, and do the same thing once they had some notoriety from the buzz gained from that first association with those vintage clothing. So they would have to find a craft brewery that likes also rock and roll and all of things, which they found one, and in fact, Matters, that's what they did. They were able to get some traction from the vintage, then and collaboration, and then they worked with the brewery, and they even got a beer that was called Matters Model Beer and so forth that was made, and they started suddenly make some revenue from those royalties that they were gaining from the product. They didn't get rich from this, but they started making some money versus losing money. They were making some. And then with
Okay,
this money, then you can re-inject it. So you have to have a vision of growth to the point that they don't spend a dime the first few months, then they make $50, then they make two or $300, then they make 1,000. Out of the 1,000, they reinvest 500, and so it's a snowball effect. But you have to have this vision of the cranking up their visibility and at the same time cranking up some return, some money that they make. But if they make $1,000, they gotta be ready to spend that $1,000 on their expenses, but mostly in investing in growing. the merch, growing something, growing the website to sell the merch and the apps and or hiring someone that's going to help them on some of the activities. So they have to do this. And so at that time, this is when you think about the break even. How many concerts do we need to do? How much merch should we
Right.
produce in order to have a return, all that. So there's some idea of break even, at least for them, because one thing I want to say with Playita is I'm hoping that there's going to be uh, hopefully you all still have attention. I've been speaking for an hour and 10 minutes almost with the stopping, and hopefully you still here with me, your brain on. But I'd like the four groups to have a message, a philosophical message that needs to be given to Playita, which is it is rare to get something for nothing. It is rare to expect that the world is gonna discover you, right? It's
Right.
almost it's
Go.
almost like boys and girls seduction. It is very rare for a boy to walk in the middle of the street and all the women to turn and look at that boy and go, "Oh my God, it's so beautiful. Let's all marry that boy." But if you
Right.
go in the brain of a man, the men, that's what they think. They think that if they walk in the middle, the women will all look at them. But the women are off and they don't think this way for the most part. And so
Okay.
that's the same thing when you go
I get it. I get
and
it.
you have to talk to that woman and make her laugh. And then you make her
Right.
laugh and suddenly she gives you her phone number. And so that's what happens is you have to activate the the relationship.
For
And it's the
them
same
to
thing
give them
in love.
enough information for them to have a paradigm shift and really understand that they have sweat equity even though they don't have
Well, for the
dollars
music,
in the bank.
yeah, they have sweat equity. You could say that, but what it is that they cannot say it's our music, it's us. It's
Right.
just it's just being that creates the need.
Right.
I I am, therefore they want me.
More, right. And that's what we're, is that what we're picking up? That's
But
what we hear in
yeah,
the
that's what we hear.
interviews.
Yeah, that's what we hear in the interviews. Exactly. Everybody hears this. So I want this. Everyone, you say what you want, but I'm hoping that you will have at least out of your 20 minutes presentation or whatever the number is, I'll reconfirm that to make sure everybody has the same amount. But there needs to be at least 30 seconds, a moment of truth, a little bit like big sister, big brother speaking to
Right.
them and say, you need to see that your music is required, but it's very likely. It's like, what is the most important? An amazing marketing and a poor song, or an amazing song and a poor marketing? At the end of the day, which one is most likely to work? I believe an amazing marketing and a poor song, I don't recommend it, but has more chances than a
Then right.
amazing song and a poor marketing because marketing can really do miracles for anything. But if you don't believe in marketing, if you think marketing is a website, it's one concert, it's merch, it's no, marketing is the whole thing. So you need to have to embrace A to Z for these people. And I think it is very common for people to think they know what marketing is and simplify it to the point that they really only capture 1%. It's like someone that goes to the gym and they say, I'm going to the gym to exercise. And every time they go to the gym, they go to the same machine, and there's like 300 machine, but they only use one machine, and they do too much of that one machine. And they do
Right.
that for 10 years. Um, I would not recommend to do this experiment, but if you take someone that every time they go, they use 10 machine, and it's every time 10 different machine, 10 years after, they are in much better shape than someone that used the exact same machine every time.
Right.
And so, thinking marketing is one machine is wrong. And so, they have to embrace the full spectrum. And they have to embrace the fact that they look down on marketing. They don't think too much about marketing. And that's what's going to make them maybe not succeed. They need to take it more seriously. even the fact that we're offering them marketing consulting services, they don't totally understand the value of it. They don't really know why they will gain from it because they don't see, it's
Well, yeah, they have some barriers, some, well, I would call it some limiting beliefs
limiting belief.
about
Yeah.
life. And really, I think this last interview, we got more out of them to communicate and to
Yes.
dream and to know that, hey, you guys are onto something here that can really turn out to, you know, be really big. That's why I asked them the question about the Grammys, and I wanted them to see,
That was very good.
you know,
But did you see it was difficult?
it was very difficult
It was very
because I
difficult.
think some musicians, and I don't know where this myth comes from, that the monetization of your music takes away your creativity.
Yeah, exactly. That's very well said. And there it comes. And I see it almost every client that we've had with the Maya. Some more, some less, but it's always there. And I would say Playita is maybe the sort of the worst I've seen from this perspective.
What are my other cohorts thinking, or am I giving it all the
Yeah, I mean, we're having a great
IP away
conversation. No, but the
and
conversation is
just
very
talking
good.
to the teacher? Well, I mean, come
No,
on,
no,
y'all.
no. What
Where
I'm saying,
Casey? Is he here?
Casey, he couldn't be here tonight.
Oh,
Um, but I'm hoping you're having this conversation in your group. If we're not having it in the class, you have to have it in your group to come up with what you think is the analysis and the solution and how to present it to them. There's got to be some moment where you have to reveal this to them. Is they're gonna have to have more of a not a commercial perspective, but more of a realistic perspective, right? And so it's going to
mm,
be interesting to see how you're going to diplomatically, but with a assertive voice, going to bring it to Playita without sounding too irritating
right,
and careful and meaning well, you know.
right,
But you're going to have to do some examples and some pictures or something to kind of get one of the group member to go, okay, I got the message. We've got to spend more time doing something that we don't do and less trying to record. Anyway, it's hard because they may feel intimidated by doing things that they don't know,
right.
not
But I
even
think
sure where to
their
start.
heart is in the right place.
Yeah. So, in a way, I felt very good of the fact that we have the opportunity to tell them something that may trigger this and put them into the right position for them to start thinking outside of this myth and more be realistic. So I just wanted to say this. If I hear the four groups say something like that, I would say, you know what, we did our job, we tried. Um, so I was almost finished with this. I just want to talk about the product line pricing and the competitor based pricing. So the product line pricing is when you sell a product that will be within the product line. So if you sell, for example, a guitar, so all of you went to a guitar store and you have this guitar on the left, and then you have 20 guitar going from left to right. And then when you look at the guitar on the left, it's 199. And when you look at the guitar on the right, it's 3,999. And you go, oh my God, they all look the same. But the reality is there's a different type of wood. There's a different accessories on the guitar. There's different finishes. There's handmade versus mass produced. There's different chords. There's all these different things. There's um, a catch and sound this and that. So that's what makes a difference. And so this one is the product line in terms of the fact that you have a different price across the product line. But within the product line, you also have the fact that you can sell um, options. So maybe you sell the option that you have um, different chord, qualities of chord, but then you also have the option of selling the accessories. So you sell like the bag. So let's say sometimes you may see this guitar. So a guitar that's 199, the producer of the guitar, how much money did they made? Maybe they made $10, the producer, because obviously $200 means it's a 50% markup at the store, so means they bought it at 100, and then it's let's say made overseas by a brand and all that, so they probably made it for $30 or maybe less even. And so there, that's why I'm saying they make $10, probably even less than $10. But then they sell the bag. And what's interesting is when they sell the bag, they'll sell that bag for $80. So then you say, oh, maybe I'll get the bag. But the bag, in fact, costed them $4. And then they made $6 for the bag. So it's a lesser investment and they make a bigger margin. So in business, it's not so much how much you make, but it's also the margin that the profit margin that you're making when you're selling the product. So that's very important when you're looking at pricing. Then you have byproduct, which means, let's say you're making guitar, and as you're making the guitar, you have a lot of wood leftovers, and then you turn this into chips, and those chips are sold to for barbecue or for sawdust for zoos or whatever. So that's the byproduct. So you can make money from byproduct. In fact, right now I'm doing a project for a company that is starting to make fruit juices using the fiber from the pulp in order to increase the blood sugar value, the low blood sugar value of drinking fruit juice with a high content of pulp and therefore of fibers. It's extremely difficult to find this in the United States. Most of the producer of fruit juice with pulp and fiber are on the northeast of America, and they are growing really fast. Pretty soon, they will be in Los Angeles. So we're helping one business trying to grow that franchise business in Los Angeles of pulp fruit juice. And so that's a byproduct. Normally, the pulp, what do they do with it? They throw it away. Now they can add it to the product so they don't have to pay to remove the pulp. And they add value to the drinkers of pulp because it adds health benefits to the juice. Anyway, bundling is when you sell multiple products at the same time. So it's like, when you go to Costco, there's a lot of bundling. If you buy the toothpaste, you get the toothbrush. If you buy the shampoo, you get the soap. So it's bundled together. Or if you go to a concert hall and you buy a season ticket. So if you buy a concert ticket, it's $200. If you buy the season tickets, it's $500, but you can go to 6 concerts. So therefore, you're saving per tickets per concert by buying multiple at once. Now, the competitive based pricing, that one I can go very fast. It's pretty easy. Is when you say my prices are going to be the prices which are connected to my competitors. So I'm going to be a few cents more than my competitors, a few dollar more than my competitors, a few dollar less. The problem with the competitor-based pricing is they may have different costs, and therefore they may be making a profit margin when you, at those prices, you have higher costs, and therefore you're not making any money. I know this for a fact because many of my competitors in the cognac business are multinationals making billions of dollars and versus me, it's a family business, and we're making barely a few $1 million. So therefore, we don't have the same cost structure, and therefore we don't buy as many. I think about NSC, for example, they buy how many bottles do they buy? They buy 120 million bottles, glass bottles. So when they go to the supplier, it will be the biggest meeting the supplier will get in the entire year. Versus me, I sell between 25,000 and 40,000 bottles. So that's what NSC does in 2 hours, pretty much. That's what I do in one year. So my purchase of bottles is much more limited, and I don't get the same kind of pricing. So competitor-based pricing is this idea of those different margins, and therefore it has a real impact on the cost. Do you have any question about the pricing strategies? No. Okay, so in that situation, let's jump in the electric car Tesla group, which is group one, and it's your last presentation. Is Casey with you?
I
Uh,
don't believe he's joined yet, Professor. I
okay,
think
so
if he gave us a timeline of like eight,
yeah,
10, if we
yes.
could
Okay, so
continue
that's
with the
fine.
lecture for a little
Yeah,
bit
yes.
longer,
Yeah,
please.
yes, of course, of course. So we're going to do
Thank you.
that, okay? No worries. So
Appreciate
I'm
it.
going to keep on going for the sake of of making sure everybody's here, if that's okay with everybody. So we'll just wait 8:10. So as I keep on going, I want to go to the concept now of distribution. So distribution is a very important, very difficult, and the music students always know about this because obviously, you can have the best song in the world, but how do you get it to the consumers? And that's usually the biggest issue. But you may not realize that's also the biggest issue when you manufacture anything. So when you manufacture, usually, and you should be very good at manufacturing, but by definition, you're not the greatest at distribution, which is a totally different job. And that's sort of what we're talking about with Playita. Making good songs really is what they think they're good at, what they should be good at, and rarely those people are also good at the marketing and distribution of their product. So there is a cost, therefore, in taking the music or taking the service or taking the idea or the good to the consumers, and that's a specialty, and therefore you either to some extent you have to pay for it. How do you go from the manufacturer to the consumer? There's one way, it's called direct. So thanks to catalogs, so that started a long time ago, 100 and some years ago, but also more recently with the internet and now with applications, you can do direct to consumers. And that's a great thing because you don't have to really develop a channel of distribution. The channel of distribution is very simple. It's just using USPS and FedEx and UPS and so forth, making sure sometimes you could have some kind of jobber in the middle that would be a fulfilling center or something like that. They will be selling the products for you and packaging it and so forth. But it's great. Going straight to the consumers is great. The big danger of going straight to the consumer is eventually you sell it so cheap that you have alienated any possibility of also selling it one day through a traditional system of a wholesaler and a retailer. Because if your product, let's say you make it for $10, how much you sell it to the consumers? Well, I could sell it for $30. I'm going to make $20 per product. I'm going to get rich fast with this. People do this, then they realize they don't sell too many products. And but they've established the price at being at $30. So then when they go see a wholesaler and a retailer, they find that there's not enough margin between them buying at 10 and selling at 30 because each one of these intermediary will be making a profit margin. So then they kind of cut the grass under their feet. They screw each themselves. Because if you had done it right, you would have said from the beginning, if it cost me $10 and I'm imagining a wholesaler plus 25%, and I'm imagining a retailer plus 50%, what would be the price that would sell? And then suddenly you decide to realize it's not $30, but it's 45. So then if you're trying to sell it direct, you should sell it 44. 43. But you should sell it in that amount of money for the day. If you're trying to sell it through a system, through the system you're protected because now when they say, "Oh, Johnny, how much are you selling your product through directly at $44?" And then they take your price, and then they realize, "Oh, that's a fair price," as if they were intermediaries. If you don't do this, you can never take intermediaries again because you have kind of murdered your brand by having a price that is too low. If you have experienced this firsthand, you have a big smile on your face because you know it has happened. Every time I explain that to someone that's never experienced it, it's meaningless. But if you experience it, then you realize it's a big problem. It's for a business, sometimes it can be the number one problem is they've destroyed their company by falling in love with the internet, falling in love with Amazon, and now next thing you know, they cannot run the business anymore because they don't take into account the W, wholesaler, the J, the jobber, so that's like FedEx, fulfilling agencies and whatever, and R, retailing. Um, if you're really, really, really sure that you'll never use intermediaries, maybe you can sell it, but it is kind of like it's like running on one leg, being really sure that you're never going to use the other leg. It's kind of, I think, not a very good idea. You should always prepare for the worst. It can happen. Okay, so what are the function of the distribution? It's to collect information and give it to you. It's to give promotion, so reductions to the consumers. So it's create a contact. So if you are, you cannot be behind every customer. You have one customer, you have 1,000 customers, you have 10,000 customers. For a producer, it's very complicated to interact with 10,000 customers. It's much easier for a retailer. It does matching, which means that there are distributors that won't sell the product everywhere. For example, my cognac sells in Total Wines. Does it sell in every Total Wine store in the United States of America? No. It sells in Total Wine based on a zip code, which means that Total Wines has information like Bevmo. I used to sell in Bevmo too. Bevmo at the time had 90 stores in California, and I was selling in 16 stores. So 16 stores had a zip code where Bevmo had information on the people in that zip codes and their profile. And those personas, those targets in those zip codes were people that look for special cognac. There are some zip codes, there's not even one person in the entire 500,000 people in that zip code that has ever cared for a special cognac. Why would you put it in that Bevmo or that Total Wine? It makes no sense. So these distributors' job is to match the store with the targets in the area. They also negotiate. So the wholesaler negotiates with the retailer. If you have to, you have to constantly negotiate, but you want to try to negotiate with the least amount of people as possible. It's all a time issue because your time should be to sell to the wholesalers, to sell to the consumers, to sell to the retailers, and they are the one that sells to each other. And you cannot have too many people to sell because then you need to increase the amount of people that are salespeople. Who is the most expensive? Who should be the most expensive employee in a business? The salespeople. So if you have to increase the amount of salespeople you have, most likely what you're going to do is hire junior salespeople because they're cheaper. But if you hire junior salespeople, it takes three, four, five junior salespeople to produce the same as a savvy, gray hair uh, senior salesperson. So that's another thing that is not in any textbook. Maybe AI will tell you that, but I'm not even sure. But that's just the law of the things. Salespeople must pay. Salespeople, gray hair usually are the best one. Why do gray hair people are the best sellers? Why? Because they've done it for a long time. Because they have the network. Because they have the trust because they've been there one time, two times, three times, 50 times. People are used to see their faces and therefore they just buy. It's almost like a Pavlovian response. They see the face of the salesperson, boom, they make a purchase order. Okay. So physical distribution, obviously they are storing and they are financing the product and taking some risks. So financing the product is very important. Sometimes you can get your distributors to pay for the product more. So they say you make 30%. If they give you a 75% down, you've already made some money. You made 5%. With this 5%, you can reinvest it to the next production. Don't tell anyone. I won't discuss this anymore. It's almost a trade secret, but this is something you find out is use your intermediaries to finance your business. They would hate to hear me say that. Hopefully they don't look at the videos. Um, Now, the next one is the three um, distribution strategies. So the idea is what do you do when you try to find what's your channel of distribution? First is who are my customers? It always starts from this. What are the objectives of the distribution? And then you have three alternative. Intensive distribution is you sell it everywhere. Selective, you sell it to medium percentage, 50%, and then exclusive is you sell it to a very, very limited, just one maybe. Like right now, I'm signing exclusive distribution to one distributor in Czech Republic. And so that person will get 100% of the sales of Czech Republic. Nobody else will sell, but they have to meet a certain purchase quota in order to keep that exclusivity. They have to buy X $1,000 a year of cognac in order to keep it. So that's very important, but you're putting all your eggs in one basket. So you have to negotiate this thing is how long does it last? What is the first year minimum order? What's the second year? What's the third year? You're making projection. You don't want to be too high because then if this person has good intention and does everything they can, but there's a crisis such as a war or whatever, and the sales don't go as predicted, then you just have a aggravated relationship which it's very difficult to find matching distributors, and it takes a long time. This one actually I found him in 2014. So 2014 I found this distributor. Since 2014 I've been discussing with him. He's been buying here and there, and now 2026, um, 12 years after, he's finally becoming my full-time distributor in the Czech Republic. But anyway, so there's a length of time that you have to put into a commercial system, and it's not like what you do today you get it back tomorrow. Sometimes it takes 5 years, 10 years to harvest. It's more of a farmer mentality. Different product that you sell have different harvest, but it requires stamina, and that's why entrepreneurship is one of the most difficult thing you can do in your life beside being married and having kids, I guess. But yeah, entrepreneurship. Anyway, then you evaluate the alternative, and then you decide what is your channel of distribution. So there's the push and pull. It's a very important strategy. Push means that you are stimulating the channel of distribution to sell your product. Pull means that you're stimulating the customers to buy your product. Which one is the most effective? Pull. When you put a Super Bowl ad, the day after the Super Bowl ad, you're going to see significant change in your sales. Customers are going to rush to the store. They're going to see the product. They're going to buy it. It's almost immediate response. They don't even, they are like robotized. They are brainwashed to be buying your product. That's the power of Super Bowl ads for the most part. So talking to the customers, the problem is it used to be extremely expensive. With social media, the costs have been significantly reduced. However, it's very noisy out there, and therefore you still have to spend a lot of money in order to be heard, even if you do social media. So if you do it yourself, if you build it yourself, it's great, but it's very time consuming. So suddenly what you were doing today, working 12 hours, now you're going to have to work 14 hours, because you're going to have to add those 2 hours plus another 2 hours that you won't do what you used to do, to have 4 hours to do the social media, build this up, create the content, blah, blah, blah. Very time consuming to do social media for customers, but down the road, after 2, 3, 4 years, also that would generate some good work. So the other option, therefore, beside pull, if you think it's too complicated, is to do push. So what you do is you go to see the distributor and you say, if you buy one pallet, if you buy 1,000, I'll give you another 1,000 for free. What's nice about this is suddenly your distribution network ends up having a lot of product. And usually when they have a lot of product, they give it more attention. So that's very true. Why? Because it's just a physical thing. It's just a rational thing. Is in the warehouse, when you look in the warehouse, they don't see your product. If they look in the warehouse, they start seeing the product, they're going to prioritize it. Businesses have sales meeting, and in the sales meeting, they talk about what needs to move. It is very common that the director, that the owner of the business, if they see too much of a product in one store, eventually doesn't even look at the computer. It's the good old-fashioned way. Takes a piece of paper and says, that product, I see it everywhere. Then speak to the salespeople and say, we need to move this product. We have too many of them. So if you give them discounts, they're going to reduce a little bit the price they're going to sell. They're going to keep the price the same, but they're going to increase some kind of advertising or communication, and they may increase the incentives for the salespeople to sell the product, but they also need to push it. That's why the push is good. So why would Professor tell us a simple example for push and pull? So um, you have a shampoo bottle. No, let's say a ketchup bottle. You have a ketchup bottle. If you see a neck collar on the ketchup bottle, is it a push or is it a pull? A neck collar on a bottle with a coupon is a push, versus if you see mm, this ketchup bottle on a radio ad, that's a pull. Radio ad is a pull. Neck collar on the bottle is a push. Just try to remember that. I'm hoping that's simple enough that you could use it in the quiz and that you could use it down the road. What do you mean? Well, it is pretty common for people who get an MBA to know the difference between push and pull. So, for example, if you were to work for Warner Brother or Sony, and then there was a meeting and you were saying, yes, we've spent too much money on push, we should start thinking about pull, and you said that, there would be a number of people that would not understand, but there would be number of people that would. You wouldn't want to be in the one that don't understand, because you'd say, you don't want to say I have an MBA, but I understand nothing because therefore it's like, why do you tell? Don't tell us you have an MBA. You're right. So these are the little retainers things that separate you from the having an MBA versus having a bachelor. Push and pull is the kind of expected little knowledge. Obviously, the best combination is when you have both. But if you have both, means you have a number of resources. So, for example, if you are Playita, which one would you use? Well, you do have to have the social media, so they should be really starting to do some pull strategy by growing their social media. Nothing else than social media. Then should they do push? Yeah, they should do push because they should do, concerts and maybe offer at the concert some free merch to the concert venue for them to make them into kind of like a game or like a competition to win something or a prize for every 25 tickets purchased or whatever. So that's what I'm trying to say is that you want to use this for those kind of formula in order to talk about some campaign. Wireless stuff, and I already talked about this, is a world of domination, and it's domination between the producer and the distributor. So at the end, who has the bargaining power? The bargaining power goes to the manufacturer for the quality of the product, for the reputation, for the contribution to the profit, and for the fact that they have consumer loyalty. Yes, but distributors also have consumer loyalty. They also have reputation. They also have some kind of profit volume making for the manufacturer. But at the end of the day, what's very important is the fact that they have volume purchase. So I give you an example. How many clients do I have in America? Well, since I sell 40,000 bottles, you could almost say I have 40,000 clients. Well, not really. I have two clients. What do you mean? Well, I have two importers. I have one for the East Coast and one for the West Coast. Sometimes I only have one that does the entire United States. So, which means that if I sell in America at least $1 million of product, I have one person that makes me a check of $1 million. So, who do you think I more in love with? This one person that gives me a check of $1 million or that person that buys a bottle for $40? Well, I'm in love with both, but there's one I don't really know, the one that goes to uh, somewhere in New York and buys a $40 bottle versus this person in New York that makes this big check. So distributors have this power is they buy many, many, many more products than any consumers will ever buy, right? So it's like a radio station buys more music than an individual because of the music they play. So that's very important to see this. But then what's the real quality of the manufacturer is the fact that they build the product and therefore they have the power of the ingredients that there is in this product, right? So it's like it's like if you buy anything, it's so processed, you know. So it's like you buy a yogurt. Who knows what's inside this yogurt at the end of the day? If you make the yogurt yourself, you can buy the milk. You boil the milk, and then you put some vinegar in the milk, and then the day after you have yogurt. And so you know the milk you bought at least somehow, you know the vinegar that you bought at least somehow. But if you buy yogurts, someone made them, and you have absolutely no idea in what they were made of. So that concept, I don't know if I lost you with this, is the concept that when you're a manufacturer, you have, for the most part, 100% knowledge of the product. And this is what you build your reputation on. But that can't be enough. But that's the discussions that you have with your distributor, plus all the efforts that you're doing to create the brand and build the brand and your reputation. And then the distributors, they need those brands. They need to fill in those spaces. They need to have a catalog. They need to have a website. They need to have app with lots of products. Okay. And so that's reputation. So it's kind of a reputation of like a parasite. You need one another. But at the end of the day, the distributor, what they do in order to beat you and put some pressure is they also ask you to make some products. So what they do is say, yes, I'll buy your ketchup. Can you make ketchup private label for my brand? And then it becomes um, the Target ketchup or the Trader Joe's ketchup. So then they sell the Trader Joe's ketchup at the same time as they sell your branded ketchup. And that's kind of crazy because you're competing with yourself. Two, you do, but at the same time, you're creating economies of scales because you buy more glass, you buy more tomatoes, you buy more of these, and therefore you are able to reduce your costs. And somehow by having larger volume production, you can have more experience curve because you have better trained staff and so forth. So that's where business suddenly becomes very complicated because you have to see all this big picture and the small picture. The long-term picture is the investment monetary, the sweat investment. All of this makes it very, very interesting. Let me finish these last three slides. What is retailing? Retailing is all the activities that involve in selling the product to the final personal or non-personal business for their own use versus wholesaling is the opposite. Is selling all of this product that these wholesaler will be selling to someone else. They will be selling it for their own use. So wholesaler is a pass-through, if you want, between the manufacturer and the retailer for the retailer to sell to the final consumers. What's interesting about the type of wholesalers is they're struggling because there's more and more manufacturers that do the wholesaling and sell to the retailer. There's a lot of retailer that they start becoming wholesaler, which means that they create some cooperative and they collaborate by buying a lot of things. So just to keep it simple, let's use Home Depot, for example. Home Depot is one company, and when they go buy a hammer, they buy 100,000 hammers that they sell in all the Home Depots in the United States. What about Ace Hardware? Now, Ace Hardware is independent. What do you mean? Well, there's a Ace Hardware owner that has two stores, another one that has one store, another one that has 12 stores. So what they do is all of these stores, instead of being by themselves, they create an umbrella company called Ace Hardware. And then when they buy hammers, they send how many hammers do they need to the Ace Hardware purchase hub. And then the purchase hub buy all the hammers and then distribute it to all the individual owners. That's how they stay alive. There's no such a thing as AIDS hardware that's all independently owned. So therefore, it's two models that are very different. So you have the manufacturer branch, you have the retailer branch, you have the wholesaler branch. Everybody's trying to survive. What is the broker agent? In fact, a broker agent to me is one of the most interesting businesses because you don't own anything. What you do is you just a network channel type of member where you don't store, you don't buy, and you just make the connection between buyer and seller. So we see the most famous one is real estate broker, but you also have all the insurance and financial broker. But you could be a broker of diamonds. You could be a broker of oil. I know some oil brokers. There are people that are extremely wealthy, but they have a lot of health problems because it's very stressful. Um, because everything changes every 5 minutes, and right now it must be very stressful to be an oil broker. Anyway, and so, but you could be a broker of furniture, of materials, of button shirt. So brokers are those people, they just know who wants lots of something and who's making lots of something. And they're just playing on the fact that the one that want doesn't is not really good at connecting with the one that makes, and the one that makes is not good at connecting with the one that wants. And they just sit in between and they make everything become successful. Okay, so let's have group one present as soon as you're ready.
Good evening, class. We are joining you to dive into, electric cars, a shocking future, and a short fuse. Joining with me is my group. So you have Casey, Jonah, myself, as well as Kobe, and then John. What exactly is EV car? So EV stands for electric vehicle. It's a car powered fully by partially by electricity instead of gasoline. It uses a rechargeable battery and an electric motor rather than a traditional internal combustion engine. EV matters because they reduce emission, they have lower fuel costs, and they help create a more sustainable future. This is especially matters to people who have health issues. The type of EV cars, so there's several different types of EV cars. So you have battery electric vehicles. So this consists of models such as the Tesla Model 3, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, as well as the Nissan Leaf. Then the next type of EV car would be your plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. So those are things such as the Toyota Prius Prime, BMW 330e. Then the next would be the hybrid electric vehicle. So these are the things such as they have Honda Accord, Honda Sonata, Toyota Camry. And then the last would be the full cell electric vehicle, which is the Hyundai Nexo and Toyota. So on our slides, I put the difference between hybrid and electric. Obviously, with hybrid, it's more complexity. It does require oil change because it is a hybrid. And then you still have to do maintenance on the battery and engine. Versus an electric car, it has fewer moving parts. There is no oil change, and there's absolutely no there is battery maintenance. Now I will be passing this along to John as he discussed SWOT analysis as well as PESTO analysis.
All right, thanks, Brittany. Yeah, I'm going to start off with the SWOT analysis. Starting out with strengths, electric vehicles have several important advantages. One of the biggest is that they produce zero tailpipe emissions, which really helps to reduce greenhouse gases and air pollution. Additionally, governments around the world are supporting EV adoption through tax credits, subsidies, and environmental policies. However, the industry also faces several weaknesses. One major issue is the high upfront cost of electric vehicles, which is largely driven up by expensive battery technology. Another weakness is limited charging access in some areas, especially when compared to the widespread availability of gas stations. And also, EV production depends heavily on rare earth materials like lithium and cobalt, which can really create supply chain vulnerabilities. Moving on to opportunities, the EV industry is experiencing rapid market growth globally as consumers become more interested in sustainable transportation. There are also major opportunities expanding in charging infrastructure, which will make EV ownership more practical. And finally, we have some threats. The EV market is becoming increasingly competitive as traditional automakers and new startups enter the industry. Supply chain disruptions, especially related to the battery materials, can impact production very deeply. There are also risks that increased EV adoption could put pressure on our existing energy infrastructure. Overall, this SWOT shows us that the EV industry shows growth and potential, but it also faces challenges related to infrastructure, cost, and supply chains. Let's move on to the PESTEL analysis. We really want to examine the broader external factors that influence the EV industry. So starting off with political factors, of course, governments play a major role in the EV market. Many countries offer government incentives, tax credits to encourage consumers to purchase these electric vehicles. Additionally, international trade policies can impact EV manufacturing, especially when it comes to these battery supply chains. Moving on to economic factors, of course, rising gas prices make electric vehicles more appealing to consumers because EVs typically do have lower operating costs since there's less moving parts. Also, falling battery prices are gradually making EVs more affordable and competitive with traditional vehicles. From a social perspective, public awareness of climate change has significantly increased, so consumers are becoming more environmentally cautious and are increasingly interested in sustainable transportation. Technological factors are actually one of the biggest drivers in the EV industry. Advances in autonomous driving software, improvements in battery efficiency, and the expansion of fast charging infrastructure are making EVs a lot more practical and convenient for consumers. Also, research into solid state batteries are really significantly improving battery performance and reducing charging times for the future. Of course, environmental factors, the biggest one. EVs help reduce these tailpipe emissions and improve air quality in urban areas. But the kicker is that there are big environmental concerns related to battery mining and disposal. On to the legal factors. These include regulations around vehicle safety, battery standards, and emission requirements. And governments are introducing new laws related to charging infrastructure and long-term plans to phase out gasoline-powered vehicles. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the marketing environment of the EV industry as well. I'm going to talk about the microenvironment first, which includes factors that are directly connected to the company and its industry. So in the EV market, this includes consumers, of course. It also includes EV demand, which has been growing rapidly as environmental awareness increases. Competitors are also a major factor, and EV manufacturers they rely heavily on suppliers, particularly companies that produce batteries and raw materials, as well as distributors who can help bring these vehicles to market. And moving on to the macro environment, these are large external forces that affect the entire industry. So, government policies, EV incentives play a major role in influencing these EV adoption rates. Economic conditions, such as the overall economy, gas prices, social factors, and technological advancements, especially in these solid state batteries, affect it heavily. So, now I'm going to hand it over to Jonah to talk about the reality of car manufacturer profit.
Alrighty. Thanks for that very in-depth analysis, Sean. Before we even explore the EV market and its potential to replace traditional petrol vehicles, we first need to understand some uncomfortable truths about the reality of car manufacturers. Because there are a lot of different types of cars. As recently as this year, there are over 500 active, legally distinct automobile makers around the world. So, how the heck do you make profit with competition this tight? And while the manufacturing process has been streamlined so well after years of technological advancement? Well, when all is said and done, car manufacturers only make real profit once, and that is right at the point of sale. You could go back for proprietary component repairs, upgrade certain features of the initial vehicle after the fact, but ultimately, the only surefire money that an auto company makes is when you buy the vehicle, or even worse, when you lease one. Realistically, that means quantity of sales trumps quality of sales any day of the week. The hard truth is that automakers today are relying on more customers to buy more cars more often because, from a profit perspective, they have no real incentive to actually make cars that last. And this framework for profit seems like the complete opposite intention of what consumers are expecting of the EV market and its participants, right? Products focused on sustainability, modernity, and longevity. But the bottom line is the auto industry doesn't make money by selling long lasting cars. So, out of the gate, the sentiments around EVs concerning cleaner energy use and reducing one's carbon footprint are already a bottom of the barrel priority to car manufacturers. And this kind of brings us to the wider issue regarding the automotive industry's profitability and why it doesn't spell well for actually investing in EVs for the future of personal transportation. This term right here, planned obsolescence, is the crux of ensuring that car makers can keep making profit even while technology seems to keep getting better and better. Planned obsolescence is the idea that eventually, to compel a customer to keep compensating a company, the product needs to either become obsolete or inoperable. Now, companies can do this in extremely bad faith, in a literal sense, like when Apple was accused of slowing down older generations of iPhones. But there are even more subtle ways that car manufacturers specifically design their vehicles in order to force their customers' hands. Using plastic components over more sturdy metal ones, fusing separately functioning components together to make the whole unit's eventual failure more impactful on the vehicle as a whole, and so on. And I hope you're not relying on the warranty period to save you either, because computer simulations have revolutionized the car design process to a point where manufacturers can basically time the life of their components to the exact mile and time period for failure. That's why it seems like older cars are so much more reliable and sturdy because, like in the 90s and early 2000s, customer satisfaction was based on singular long-term purchases. So the design process actually overcompensated for vehicle lifespan because customers weren't buying cars as frequently and because safety regulations and emission standards were much lower. But now the length of a warranty period is decided by a customer, not because companies are actively designing cars to fail, but because the rate at which customers are buying new cars is motivating manufacturers to make modern vehicles last a shorter amount of time. So, what does all this messiness mean for the EV industry, right? Well, it means that traditional car manufacturers have a lot of heavy lifting to do on the promotional side of things to even make transitioning into EV vehicles a profitable decision. All aspects of the promotional mix come into play: public relations at car trade shows and demonstrations, direct marketing to owners of your petrol vehicles to try and get them to switch to the electric version, and so on, right? And frankly, not every automaker out there is down for the grind. At least here in the US, the current administration has been stripping back a lot of the subsidies and tax incentives on both the producer and consumer side of EVs. So quite a few companies have given up on their latest venture because it adds undue expenses to their product mixes, like Acura shutting down production on the ZDX model. Other players that are already active in the EV market are taking different approaches to get a payday. Particularly for electric trucks, for example, Tesla is going the product development route via the Cybertruck by relying on brand loyalty within their current bubble of EV enjoyers, while Rivian's diversification strategy more so targets truck lovers who are completely new to the EV market. Finally, we have a handful of companies like Volvo and Volkswagen who are going all in on changing their core product and their sales completely to EVs based on macroeconomic factors that may force EVs to become the new standard vehicle. And it's a change that's happening just across the pond that I will hand over to Casey to discuss.
Thanks, Jonah. So this case study is part of a wider movement to bring all cars in the UK to be only. According to Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders in the UK, this was 2022. Out of 2 million cars sold, only 220,000 of that were EV. By 2030, it was projected that would be 50%. 50% of cars bought in the UK would be EV as far as what's on the market. Bringing down CO2 footprint is a nice idea, but those that are in heavily populated areas, even with the additional EVs, the air would not be as clean, depending on where you live. And to add to this, the amount of energy that would have to be used to keep batteries maintained and fully charged may outweigh the potential impact that EVs would have on the overall market. As we go to sustainability, so a few things I'm going to hit here: electricity. So just as an example, we took Huntington Beach, which has a population of 190,000 versus a more rural area such as Mariposa, California. And Huntington Beach, there, as far as what they were paying per kilowatt, the national average is 0.19 cents, and that was a 94% increase. And so you would think in a rural area that wouldn't be as much. It wasn't, but it was still a 57% increase even for a rural area from the national average. And so what this means for a monthly cost is that in dollars and cents is that in a given month in Huntington Beach, they were paying over $300 a month just for energy costs. And in Mariposa, it was a little under 300. But if both customers were to invest in solar, according to sunsolar-electric.com, the cost could decrease by up to 75%, and this could help with the addition of purchasing an EV model. And then second, the market. According to BBC in 2023, 1 in 5 vehicles sold were EV, and that was a 33% increase from the year prior. According to the Institute of Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, 51% of nickel was made in the Indonesia coal mines. Alternatively, companies are recycling dead batteries and reconstructing them, taking out the components that can be harmful to the environment to create a cleaner alternative. And then third, longevity. Charging stations for EV vehicles are widely available in cities due to population, and more rural areas. Like we've said previously, this could be a challenge due to availability and infrastructure. According to CNBC, EVs over a 5-year period lost their value faster than gas-powered vehicles by 13%. According to Fox Business Poll, where 1,200 Americans were surveyed, um, over half had no interest in buying EVs, while Gen Z's interest went from 61 to 41%. So it just kind of shows you kind of where the market is. But also, um, in same year as 2023, the Ford CEO, Jim Farley, um, was they were scheduled to produce over 600,000 EV vehicles by 2024. And that ended up being last year, those sales were roughly 85,000, and that's according to Ford.com. And now I'm going to pass it on to Colby, where he's going to talk about hesitations of the consumer side, as well as some controversial opinions or not from his group mates.
Thanks, Casey. If we could go back one slide real quick. Thank you. So, outside of like a total, ban on petrol cars, like we saw in the case study with the UK, a lot of it does boil down to the consumer sentiment and where they're putting their dollars. And I think it's important to look at some of the hesitations that we see in the EV market. And according to a recent June 2025 study by AAA, some of the biggest barriers that consumers are expressing into entering into the EV market and buying an electric vehicle are related to cost. 62% of people cited high battery repair costs as a huge concern before even purchasing an EV. 59% pointed to the actual purchase price, with EVs still being relatively expensive to buy, although that price has been trending downward. EVs in general also carry high depreciation, which affects the total ownership cost. Charging anxiety is another concern that consumers have. Over half of the people that AAA surveyed, they expressed concerns about long distance travel, lack of public, like convenient public charging stations. And then another issue is infrastructure when it comes to charging, especially for people who rent. The majority of people who have EVs are able to actually hook up EV chargers in their garages or at their house, but this is not an option available to renters. Um, so ultimately, the consumer hesitation isn't just a resistance to the change, but it's driven by financial decisions. And we still see that the EV market is pretty expensive to enter into. And with that being said, our group has formed our opinions throughout completing this project, and I'd just like to read you some excerpts from some of our fuller opinions here. So Casey said that after researching the topic, he has formed the opinion that the gas guzzler is still king, and once the novelty of owning an EV wears off, owners are faced with decreased performance and cheap manufacturing parts, where you would need to replace a vehicle faster than a diesel-powered vehicle. So will the UK see its dreams realized by all EVs by 2030? He doesn't see that becoming a reality. Jonas said that unless mass enforced government policies are implemented, the pure longevity and accessibility of regular petrol vehicles and their infrastructure will be hard to beat. I expressed a similar sentiment. As it stands, electric vehicles overall are actually net negative to the environment, and to change that right now, instantly you would need overbearing government enforcement. John said that as a society, we need to develop a method where every consumer, whether urban or rural, can have access to a vehicle that is good for the environment, as well as develop public transportation. And if electric cars are manufactured in a way where they will last, the consumer and are easy to access charge stations, he could see widespread adoption. And then Brittany also believes that EV cars can be dangerous sometimes, such as Cybertrucks and Waymos. And she doesn't like the idea that you have to go somewhere and sit and wait for your car to be charged. And that's the reason why she wouldn't actually mind a hybrid. With that being said, we thank you for tuning in and listening to us present this topic of EV and going through the case study of what the UK is doing and how that could potentially affect other markets. So thank you.
Just to finish here, I wanted to talk to you about one of the slides actually was showing this, but it was to talk about the last P that I have not discussed yet, the last P of promotion. So the last P of promotion is made of public relation, direct marketing, personal selling, sales promotion, and advertising. But it's missing one here. Which one is it missing? Digital marketing, which is the internet, social media, email, and all this. All of that is missing. So it's called digital marketing. But anyway, I have a video that I am going to give you for this one as well, the digital marketing. But just to review this, what are the objectives of communication? So the objective of communication, so here it says advertising, but it should be a broader aspect is communication. Is one is to inform. So the idea is not always to sell. The idea maybe just to get people to know. Then is to sell, it's to persuade. The third one is to compare because sometimes people have a stereotype and you want to kind of benchmark yourself against a stereotype in order to shift people's mind. And then you want to remind. If Coca-Cola stops reminding people, that becomes a problem because then they'll think about who's reminding them. And if it's Pepsi, they'll be buying more Pepsi. So if you advertise, you cannot stop. If you communicate, you cannot stop. If you do PR, you cannot stop. If you do digital marketing, you cannot stop. You have to constantly do it in order to remind people. When you're looking at a campaign, what are the ways you measure the effectiveness of the campaign? One is the communication. Do they remember the message? And two is the sales, as it increase sales. So it's like you change the communication, you see if it changed the sales. You change again the communication, you see if it changed the sales. The change that you made is what you associate with the change of sales. Plus 10% sales, therefore the change was generating plus 10% sales. There may be some confounding factor, but you usually try to make some association with those changes. So you don't make too many changes because then sometimes they are very difficult to replicate if you make too many changes. Communication is, do people remember the message? Do people remember the slogan? Do people remember the Super Bowl ad? And that's very, very important because if they remember the ad, you're building the brand and you're building familiarity, and eventually familiarity will could translate into sales. So sales is not always the first thing you get, it may be the last thing you get. How do you define your budget? Well, for Playita, it's very simple, is what you can afford. Other people will say sales. I want to increase my sales by 10%. I increase my budget by 10%. Some other people will make it more complicated. Is they would say, what are specifically your objective? Well, we want to increase our reputation and we want to increase the perception of reliability. For these two, we have to several programs that we want to do, and these programs are going to cost X. X plus X equals Z, and then you have your budget. Competitive parity is you look at what your competitors spend and you try to replicate that. So sales promotion is part of communication, and it's the idea that you try to create some mass communication to create some short in terms incentives so people are encouraged to buy within a short period of time. Sales promotion is not all the time, it's within a short time with a specific gain. What is public relations? Public relations is a method to communicate information that is not direct. It's information that is building some favorable perspectives, is building goodwill in the community, and it's creating an attitude that is all good about the company in order to create people, to make people think positively about your company. What are the activities? First is you talk to the press. Then you create some content. You write articles, you take pictures, you make videos. Then you speak to the public, you speak to the politicians, you lobby certain groups, you talk to the investors. And then you develop some new ideas, slogans, vision, image of the company, which is going to be used by the marketing team in order to grow the positioning. So create news, create speech, you organize events, you write newsletters, you write articles, you give the articles to the media, you create videos, you post the videos, you make sure that the social media, the websites, all of this is running and it's current and it's frequently being upgraded and updated and so forth. That's what the PR people do. So what is advertising? Advertising is very different. It's a paid form of non-personal presentation. So do you pay for public relation? You pay for public relation, but it's not directly paid. So it's not is you paying for the team, you paying for the events, you paying for all this versus the advertising is it's there is something you have to pay in order to be placed, to be seen in some kind of a scenario, such as it could be sponsoring, it could be an ad on the radio, it could be a billboard, it could be a magazine, all of this. So the idea is they will promote you and you will be clearly identified. So if you're writing a plan in marketing, what's the name? It's called marketing plan. So if you're writing a plan in advertising, is it called an advertising plan? Well, I guess if you call it an advertising plan, everybody would understand. But the right name for it is called a copy strategy. Okay. Oh, so it's missing the name here. Oh no, yeah. So the plan for for advertising is called copy strategy. Um, Deciding which media to use. So you have to decide about the fact that the how many of my target will be looking at this communication. So this is the reach and the percentage. How many times will they actually see the ads? How many ads will be seen? So it's like you think about a magazine, you sell, I don't know, 10,000 magazine, but the magazine are seen by 12 people. So at the end of the day, 120,000 people may see your ads. Now, it's not very common because people don't buy as many magazines. And you go to the doctor, there's no more magazine. Everybody's on their phone. But there used to be a time those magazines they were sort of used by everyone, and therefore there was multiple use of one single media. So the frequency is the um, is this idea that people look at it again. So if you talk about social media, it will be sort of the number of people that will see the message, so that's the reach, and then the frequency or the length is how long do they stay on the video or the picture or the article being posted and so forth, or on the store. Um, did they open a shopping cart and all this? So then you try to measure the length of time. You try to measure the number of times they come, the day they come, who they are, and so forth. The media impact is different media have different impact in terms of the perception of the validation or the validity, the expertise of who's saying what. So if it's the Wall Street Journal and they're talking about financial um, subjects, they have high relevance. If it was a gun and ammo magazine and they're talking about financial subjects, they won't have the same credibility. So different media have different credibility on different subjects. So it's like a hip hop media talking about rock and roll won't have as much credibility. Now, I just want to finish very quick. There are seven major advertising. There's TV, radio, magazine, newspaper, internet, outdoor, and social media. So I was talking about the copy strategy is the name for a plan, advertising plan. But just to finish now, when you create a copy, which means that you create a message to talk about your product, you have three directions. So what's important here is to talk about the fact that the copy is looking at the product specifically. So the message is centered on the product. That's the model one. The message is centered on the performance, meaning the functionality, the benefits of the product, or the message is centered on the universe, so the environment, who's using it, where it's used, is it used for gift, is it used for one person, is it used for a group, is it accepted by the community, and so forth. So just to finish this, let's look at four ads, sorry, for Coca-Cola. So remember, it could be on the product, it could be on the performance, or it could be on the universe. What is this ad focused on? Is it focused on the performance? You know, what happens when you drink Coca-Cola? No. Is it telling you where it's used and who's using it? No. Is it telling you about the product and how the product looks like? Yes. So it's a product focused communication. So sometimes it's not as clear because sometimes there is a mix with one being more than the other. So in this situation, is it focused on the product, the performance of the universe? You do see the product, but it's not focused more on the product. Here it's more clear. This is the product. This is somewhat the product, but it's more focusing on the universe. So it's telling you that it's cool, it's refreshing, it's a party time. It says the party starts here. So it's more of an emotional thing. So therefore it's the universe. Now, here you see this product and it's telling you what is the focus. Also, it's written in French, so I have to tell you what it says is enjoy the moment. So it's deeply enjoy the moment. So Is it focusing on the product? Well, you do see the product, but it's not so much totally focusing on the product. Does it focus on the performance? Well, there's a little sexual element of performance here, just in case you didn't see it, I have to whisper to you. And then, if another way is also the universe. So it's this kind of a moment of sharing, a romantic moment almost, or something like this. And that's focusing more on the universe, a little bit on the performance, a little bit on the product. It's a mix, but more so on the universe. Here's another ad. Um, what does this focus on? This focus on the performance because of the message underneath. The pose that refreshes and cool. So you see the product, um, the universe. There's a little bit of universe, but not too much. It's mostly tells you that it's cool and refreshing. So it's the performance, it's the mountains, it's the ice, it's the coolness, it's the bubbles. So if you want something cool and refreshing, it's Coca-Cola, and the performance is the focus here. So it is very important to understand that you can use the combination, but you always have one more or the other. And you don't do this from a creative perspective. It's because the consumer told you, I don't know why I would drink Coca-Cola. You drink Coca-Cola because of the benefits of cool and refreshing. Oh, yes, that would be great. If it's cool and refreshing, that's really what I want. But I don't know that it is. And I don't know what else is. So you're just building. So it's all image driven. The product can have all of these facets and it's all image driven.